This game, Ransom, is another interesting example of an outdoor game. What I really love about this game was that in state of the game is held all within this power within these transparent. So the way the game works is you hold up this transparency, and there's a bunch of letters on it, and you match those up with the letters on the signs. So if you held this and then lined it up to Foot Locker matched with a sign that says Foot Locker in Times Square, and that would circle some other letters that you would use as clues to solve to get to the end point of the game. And what I think was really great about this was all your sort of progress in the game is very much encapsulated in this one transparency. That's all you really need to play the game. All the rules are baked right into it, which is a very clever thing for a big game to have again, because asking people to remember a lot of stuff is very hard. But if you give them an object which can start to do some of that for them and manage that helps a lot. So, so we're talking now about Gigaput and this ideal our design process for that. And our goal with this was to make a casual, real-world game. So, actually, you just have to pardon me for 1 second while I grab some more water. Okay, sorry about that, guys. No. Talking constantly for a while, I get a little coffee. So, with Gigaput, with Gigaput, what we wanted to do, we wanted to make a game that really spread out over a big space. And so, one of the things we'd identified when looking at all these other real-world games that we played was this notion of how confusing they generally are. Oftentimes, like you have a hard enough time when you get someone outside, and and you're asking them to run around and remember all these rules. It's confusing. People are used to playing games in certain modes. They're used to playing at their computer. They're used to playing board games. The idea of going outside and doing something is often a little, like, already you've taken them out of their comfort zone. And so you really have to think about how to act in a position where they're comfortable. How do you take this game, through your game, do you make it feel familiar and give it some clear goals? A lot of big games that take place in the real world often take place over long distances, and they often involve breakdown or running. They're always about, like, getting somewhere first or collecting everything first. And then, you wind up with really sweaty people with, really nasty, blistery feet. And that was something we wanted to avoid, just because most people aren't that good at running that far. Oftentimes, also with big games, there's this really exciting thing when we make them, this idea of like, oh, we're going to take advantage of all these people around, and it'll, be this interesting controlling of crowds. And what that sometimes leads to is people feeling like they're being ant farmed, and that was something we really wanted to avoid as well. People don't like to feel like they're being farmed or like being told what to do by the designer. They want to feel like they're making choices, and so we really wanted to make a game that really gave players a lot of choices rather than they were like just responding to the system's demands of them all the time. So our goals with the game were to make something that was that it didn't involve running, that you could play at your own pace, that used that was really simple and clear, that it was like easy to get into, it was easy as sort of like a almost ABC book, and that had sort of interesting light social elements to it. And with that, and so we thought for a while about all sorts of different games that you can make that would have these qualities, that would help us accomplish these goals of making it easy, making it, pacing it, and also having some social elements to it. And we thought about a bunch of different games, and when we were looking at them, I was teaching talking about golf, and I thought, it's interesting. I had never really thought about it, but golf's great. Here's an outdoor game that really, paces itself. Like, it doesn't involve running because once you hit the ball, you can take as long as you want to walk to the ball. There's no sense of like ball faster. You could play golf like that, but there's no reason to. And so, that was sort of like a really, became sort of the framework that we hung this game around was giving people a system where they can make choices at the time they needed to do it. Golf is also interesting, and it has a large culture. It allows people to go outside and drink beer, I guess, or pound beers. A very flexible system. So here's a version of people playing frisbee golf, and what I think is interesting about this is it's essentially the same system as golf. It's all about getting your frisbee in the hole in the least amount of shots possible, or under par. But it doesn't look or feel that much like golf, and so the system of golf is we wanted to borrow. Also, it has the element of the swing in it. So it's like a physical act, which allows for a fair amount um, of variation. So it's something you can get better at over time, which was something that we really wanted to tap into. And we realized that like the Wii Golf, we had an accelerometer on the iPhone, so we could do some similar things that they did in Wii Golf, right? So you have this simple gestures. We could get it a physical activity, like start to mimic a physical activity in a really casual, easy way. And and we wanted to give the game a bit of the element of like something like geocaching, where you're kind of walking around and discovering the outside world. In golf, well, I mean, although you're doing it on a prescribed course, we figured with our version of golf, we could kind of take people outside of that and direct them to places they hadn't normally been. Like what Gigaput actually wound up looking like. So Gigaput is our answer to this. It's our iPhone golf game. So the game uses GPS to create a golf course around your neighborhood. You hit the ball and then track it down on the map to take your next shot. So you can see here the ball on the streets. You walk up to it. When you get close enough, you can see it on your map, and then you wind up and take a swing. And your ball will then flies over the map, and then and eventually you can knock it in the hole. So we wanted to make a game where you could play. It had some social elements, as I mentioned. So you can actually play on one phone. You can play a hot seat version where there's 4 people can play. You get to choose a club, line up your shot before you swing. So you do all this on the screen before you actually do the swinging motion. We could put a bunch of different avatars in, so you could play all sorts of different characters. So that's sort of the rundown on how the game works. So it's pretty simple, right? It's essentially mini golf outside with your phone. So when we first came up with the concept, we were thought, well, how are we going to translate this this idea for the player? How are we going to make it knowable, and kind of a art look should it have? How can we make this game feel fun and understandable? So we went through a bunch of different iterations of look and feel. So here's an example of when we a bunch of our initial concepts. So this one borrows the character straight out of the LPG or the PGA Tour. Very much about a map and golfing. This was a much more kiddie-like version, kind of maybe borrowing on some artwork that you might see in a game, like a Nintendo game. This was our oddly Scottish tartan-wearing robot version of Gigaput. We also thought of doing something kind of more photorealistic with stencils, kind of playing on this idea of being outside and having markings around the world. And just a few other ones. and with that stencil version, this idea of that there's be these markings. So we were really once we kind of settled on that direction, we thought, well, what can we use as influences? We were really into a graffiti artist named Banksy. He's done a lot of interesting, beautiful stencils that we figured like would kind of fit with this game. So it's all about like kind of discovering these interesting little elements around the city. So these are a couple paintings by Banksy that were spread around Bristol, England, where he lives and works. So we came up with our own version of our Banksy inspired stencil. So this is the fat cat in the game. These are the different avatars that you can play. The B-boy, and put those into the game, and then built all the game around those sorts of those elements. So I'm going to walk you through a bunch of different screens that actually wound up making the game, like showing you original versions, and then sort of the alpha versions, and then the final versions. Original player select screen, and this is kind of how we refine the gameplay over time. So on the screen, you had this notion of you would come in, and there are 8 different avatars in the game, and you can choose which one you want, and then go back and hand it over to the next person. They get to choose who they want. And we thought that was good, but then it didn't really give enough sort of narrative flavor to the game. This game was very much about reminding you that you're outside. So, what we eventually settled on was we wanted to make it, play to that. And we actually went around and took a bunch of photos and photoshopped them with the characters from the game in these actual situations where they were spray painted. I think that did a lot to make the game have this feeling of being outside. And I think a lot of people have really responded to that in the artwork. We also decided to not let you name the character. That was just an extra step that you didn't really need to do. You'd probably just give it your name in it or just type in nonsense. So we thought, we'll just name the characters and you just choose one. This wasn't a game about customizing an avatar. So once you choose your player, you are presented with a course that you're going to play. And so the original one had all this information that you could read, like here's the hole, here's how the par for, here's how many meters you have to go, that you're going to have in the game. And what we decided was that was just way too much information. No one really cares how many meters you have to walk necessarily, or how many what the par is. What's more interesting is just what the map looks like. So we took out all that course information and just gave you a picture of what the map looked like. So when you actually look at it, you can go, oh, that looks like a course I'd like to play. I wouldn't mind walking over to that baseball field. Or, oh, it actually put a hole in the middle of the river, of the Hudson River. I don't think I can do that, so I'm gonna get a new course. So again, just making things like trying to streamline them, thinking about how much information we're gonna give the player to make it easier and more digestible more quickly. And again, doing more to tie it to the real world, to actual location. So here's the original game screen, a little bit more in line with one another. We just kind of changed information display around a little bit. Again, taking off certain information like the distance of the ball, and just relying on the visuals of you approaching the ball, and trying to make some of the buttons a little bit pop out a little bit more. And then once you have here's the aiming screen. Well, one of the things we really tried to do with this, and is to make it feel like you were going through choose a club. 2, I'm gonna tap and drag to aim, and then 3, I'm gonna shoot. I'm gonna actually swing the ball. So and kind of thinking about how that might work like hierarchically. So we start with everything at the top of the screen. In the final version on the right, where you say, I'm going to choose my club, now I'm going to tap and drag to aim the ball, and then at the bottom, I'm eventually going to choose to say I'm ready to hit the ball. Versus the other one where, the choices were a little bit more mixed up. You've got some of the stuff at the bottom, then you've got the thing in the middle. And all that was sort of like we got it from user testing. On the swing screen, we actually wound up, one of the things, this came up really late in the process, this was actually about in the final week before we shipped it, was to add a practice mode in here. And I think this was actually one of the better things we actually did in the game, was to allow you to actually practice your swing. Before, you would just, you had no idea how strong your club was going to be or how strong your swing was. So here we give you a way to sort of practice. You could press and hold this and try out different swings by, doing it, and then and seeing what it would be on there. And then when you felt you could have the right swing, you would just switch it over to the real swing mode. And then again, doing more, trying to make the feedback that we gave as graphical as possible, really tying it again to the location. So, before we were giving you like a big piece of paper that told you how to show you how many meters you hit it, and then actually show you the map to see where it went. One of the things that we also came to in the game, originally we thought like, oh, we'll just do kind of a straight up version of golf, where you're kind of walking around and scoring points, and then we eventually decided to do is kind of make this a little bit more like mini golf. And one of the great things about mini golf is it has that really casual feel. It's got lots of bling in it, lots of things popping and swirling and changing colors, and give the game more intermediate goals. So in a lot of golf video games, there's a sense of like, I'm driving to the hole, but really it's only the last shot that matters. Every shot before that, I'm just getting a little bit closer, and which kind of makes all those first shots feel kind of aim at the hole and swing for it. So what we want to do is give people more intermediate goals. So we put all these coins in and bumper that they could go for. They could collect points, which sort of changed the dynamics of golf. It's not so much about getting under par. It's about collecting points. But what it did was it allowed every swing to feel more meaningful, to really give you intermediate goals between getting in your first swing and getting it in the hole, so you can kind of have more choice. And so one of the things, and then there was this swing that we worked on, and this is what I did in that practice swing that we put in. Originally we didn't have slice in it either. That was another element that we added relatively late in the game. So originally there was you would swing the iPhone, and because the accelerometer in an iPhone is relatively weak, it's really easy to max it out. A small child can max it out if they swing it hard, really just whip it around. So what we wanted to get was people to feel more controlled, like they were like swinging it a certain way, and so that not just they were like swinging as hard as they could, but they were kind of doing a more controlled motion. And so to get that notion, and we had this idea of slice, like that if you swing it too hard, that was actually bad. So what you want to do is like get it just so it goes just before the slice. Variability was really interesting. What it did to the game, it made it much more dynamic and much more fun. It was super predictable every time. You could eventually develop a little bit of skill at the game, which I think was very important. Some of the things that we got right. Here are some things we didn't get right. So here's how many steps you have to go to start a game. So you come in, you pick a golfer, you choose your player, you review your core to get to the game screen, and then you have to hit go. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screens you have to go through, and that's way too many. I think a lot of people get kind of bogged down. It's like, wow, when's this thing gonna start? Which I don't think is a good thing. Then also the process of taking a swing is still a little too laborious. We wanted to make this as casual as possible, but because of the way we were playing the game, because you have this iPhone here, and you can aim on the iPhone, so you've got this, you tap and drag to aim, but then, you actually have you swinging it. We had a real hard time figuring out what the sort of right amount of feedback to give was, because I'm not looking, once I start swinging it, I'm not looking at it anymore. I'm looking over here in the sorry, get this in here. When I wind up, I don't know where it is and what's going on the screen, so we can't rely on you looking at that. And It was difficult to be able to press the button. So I think we kind of still haven't gotten the swing down to a really good, smooth place. One of the other things we found too is in public is kind of weird. A lot of people don't want to do it, especially if you're making something that's intention is to be very casual. Something that can stand on the subway and be like, "Oh, hold on 1 second, I'm just gonna stand up here and take a swing next to somebody." That sort of thing just isn't going to happen. People play on the subway, hold it in their lap, and do. So that's a much more casual way to interact with the device. And I think in this way, asking someone to swing it's just not casual enough. Things we did get right, I think that, like I said before, this notion of having the sort of mini golf like element of collecting coins was really good. That's kind of my favorite part of the game is picking up all these coins, and the slice. I think that's interesting. Like just kind of trying to figure out the right level of skill you have to do the actual swing. And also, I think we got right this notion of walking around. Like every time we go out and play it, it's actually a ton of fun. It gets you outside and walking around and kind of experiencing the world in a different way, which is really exciting. I think lastly, the one of the most important things we got right was we realized that a lot of people are just never going to do this. They're never going to walk around. What they want to do is they want to play. So we built in a second mode of play into the game, which allows you to play while you sit on your couch. We have exploring mode and snoring mode in the game, and I think that's really kind of crucial to how a lot of people are going to play it. Everyone's going to go out and run around and play the game. I mean, I know some people have, and a lot of people have emailed us and said they really love that element of the game. But I'm sure there are a lot of people who just sit on their couch and back away, which is okay. They're still getting this idea of location. It's still pulling their current location. So they're getting some of the notion of it. They don't necessarily have to leave their house. And I think that's still interesting.